Today if you are my Canadian friends. And soon, I guess, we're going to be having 4th of July for my American friends. So this week, I wanted to talk to you about doing a great big sky. So I'm talking about the kind of sky that actually feels like it's coming right up and over your head and just sort of fills up the page. So that's what I wanted to look at today. And I'm going to switch on over here. There we go. So I'm going to be working on Arches 140-pound cold press watercolor. And the size I'm using is 15 by 22. And I'm going to be using mostly DaVinci Watercolors. So, sorry, I have some funky lighting going on in here today. I have been trying to fix a light. So I have none of my regular lights in here today. But hopefully there's enough light that we can get something out of this. So for this, I'm going to be needing a big brush. So something like a hockey brush or a hockey brush. This one's a synthetic brush. It is 3 inches. This one looks to be the same. And I'm going to be using some other soft brushes. So something maybe like this and some of my other squirrel hair brushes. So I have pre-softened all of my paint. And the reason I'm doing that is because if I pre-soften my paint, I'll be able to get my rich color out of it. This is going to be really important because if we are working on wet paper, what always happens when you work on wet paper is the water on the paper dilutes the color that you're adding. So it ends up much lighter than you expect. So I want to have this, and of course in a sky, you don't want to rework a sky if at all possible because of the the opportunity of muddiness and all of that sort of thing, and just overworking the paper. Once your paper gets wet, it does get more fragile. And if you are working it and working it and working it, you're removing sizing, and you are just starting to pill up the paper a little bit more. And of course, the colors start mixing. So, greetings. I'm seeing greetings from all over the place, but I'm not going to draw this. And what I'm going to do instead is I want to capture the feeling of this sky. I don't necessarily have to capture it, cloud for cloud kind of thing. I just need to get the feeling, the lighting, the values, all of that sort of thing. So I left my print on the printer. I'll be right back. Okay, so this is my image. You can see it has printed a little bit warmer than the digital image here. But sometimes the printer paper that you're using will give you either a warmer or a cooler printout. I rather like this one, but I might make my clouds just a little bit more cool in my painting. So first things first, I'm going to work with a very limited palette. I find that working with a limited palette makes everything a little bit more harmonious. If you're, taking a new color out of a tube every single time, you end up with a mystery, right? You just end up with a lot of different colors, and nothing really connects to anything else. So I want to be able to connect this as much as possible. Now, here's the big issue with doing something where the sun is setting and you're getting the warm colors mixed in with the cool colors. You get these mixed up on your page, and what happens is you end up with mud. And you may have experienced that in some of your sky paintings previously. So I am going to probably stand for some of this. Let me just get this one picture out of the screen. Okay, so that you can see some of my water. You don't need to see me, you can see my water. And I'm going to have some paper towels available. So what I want to do is I'm going to wet the entire paper. I'm going to ignore the dark foreground here with the Dollarama and the beer store. So I was at this plaza and I just happened to see this sky and I couldn't resist. So I'm going to change my foreground here because that's not what I want in my foreground. But I really loved these clouds and the way the light was working. So I want to achieve some softer edges like we have up in here. There's a lot of sort of softness up in here. And then you see maybe just the hint of a few harder edges, like the top of this cloud. You can actually see, you could take a pencil line and actually outline it. Others are a little bit more fuzzy, so I want to have a combination of dry and soft edges. And for that, that means dry or wet paper. So wet is the key ingredient here. So I'm ignoring the foreground and I'm just going to work the entire page for this. I'm going to kind of stand up so that I can get my entire arm into it rather than just, sitting and working on it. I find that if you're working a little bit larger, as I am, and I know that a couple of you have talked to me about working larger. And so this, let me move my mic now that I'm standing up. This will allow you to, see it at a distance, much as like an acrylic or an oil painter would stand back from their easel to see their painting. This allows you to see the entire thing. But as I said, it also allows you to get your entire arm into it. So I am going to load up this, set my picture aside for a moment, and I'm going to wet my paper. My paints are already softened up, so they're ready to go. And I'm going to wet the entire thing. And I'm being pretty generous about this. When you have cotton paper, this one is 100% cotton, it is like crazy absorbent. So if I don't put a generous amount on there, by the time I start applying color, it's already soaked in. So I'm applying lots here. And I'm not going to immediately start painting into this, because if I start painting into it immediately, I really won't have any control whatsoever. It will swim around in unpredictable ways. Swim around on the surface. I'm also using a really, really light touch for this because I really don't want to disturb the sizing on the paper, if at all possible. I have pre-stretched this paper. That means I soaked it for about 3 minutes, both sides, and stapled it down. Now, of course, once it starts reabsorbing a lot of this water, it's bound to wrinkle. Right? I've just added a whole lot of water to this. It's got nowhere to go, so it is going to it's going to do this because it is fixed on the sides. I've stapled it down, but I do know that this is going to dry perfectly flat. Let me just move a couple of my electronics out of the way while I'm splashing around. And there we go. So that is soaking in, and you might even be able to see some of the wrinkling that's happening. I don't really have puddles on here, but it is good and wet. All that water, I don't have enough light in here to show you, but there we go. All that water is, a lot of it is already soaking in. All right, so let's take a look at the picture again. And I'm seeing a lot of nice, warm, rich, warm colors down in here. And of course, my blue from the sky here. And then we have our cloud colors in here, which are kind of a purple gray. So that's kind of what I'm looking at. And this, you know that, Bridget, you're saying this is a stormy sky, and I think this was after a storm. It is not like it was the end of the day, and we had a lot of rain, but it was starting to break up. So this is what we got afterwards. So sometimes you get the best sunset reference pictures after a storm. Anyway, so I'm going to just do a little bit more brushing here, and that's because the paper is starting to buckle, and the water, where of course wants to settle into the valleys, the low spots, and the tops, the higher spots where it buckles up, the top of the buckle is drying out. So if I redistribute this, I'll have a lot more predictability when I actually go to paint it. Okay, now I want to make sure I don't have any puddles as I'm doing this. So I'm going to do a little tilt, and I'm going to soak up a little bit of whatever comes down to the bottom here. See, it's pouring off onto my table. There we go. I'm not trying to remove a lot of the water. I just want to remove the excess. Okay, tilt it back the other way. I'm not trying to remove it all, just the excess. So you can see the paper is starting to wrinkle. I'm not worried. But I want to think about getting the background, what's behind the clouds. I want to get that in at this stage. So I'm going to get some gold colors going here. I'm going to use this great big squirrel hair brush. This one's a number 6, and as you can see, it's about the size of my thumb. I'm going to use, I think I'm going to use some quinacridone gold. Also some gamboge. And you'll see in my puddle, it's not really a wet puddle. It's not dripping down my page or anything. I've got a fair bit of color in there. I am on purpose using transparent colors here that will allow a lot of the white of the paper to help it feel more glow. Bit of undissolved color there, just trying to brush it in there. Remember, this has got to be stronger than what you want to end up with, because this is going to dry a lot lighter. Because I'm doing a big sky, this is why I am using a larger format. You may have seen in my Instagram post, I think it was yesterday, where I posted a lot of mini landscapes, and a lot of them were skies. But I really want this as a painting to feel sort of grand and large. So I'm going to my gamboge here. The gamboge starts to get me a little closer to my cooler colors. So I'm even going to transition over here to my aureolin. I think I'll just go aureolin here. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush really well, because I want to start moving on over into my cerulean blue. I think I'm going to use. Now cerulean's not the most transparent color, but it's also not the color I need to have glowing. So let's see here. I'm going to start putting in some of these areas of blue sky. And there's also going to be a little bit of cobalt in here as we start to move away a little further from the actual sunburst at the horizon. We get more of this type of coloring back here in the clouds. And some of that might end up feeling a little bit green, and I'm not worried about that at all. Once things start to happen with everything else in the sky, you know, a hint of green in the sky is not going to be anything to be worried about. I just put my photo in the paint here. Okay, so even down in here, you know, you might start to see a little bit of a green color forming, and that's perfectly fine. I don't think I have a big enough table here. This is why I usually work smaller, but now notice the clouds feel like they're sweeping down from the corner. So I'm going to start to do some of that with my brush strokes. This is a big part of how we get it to feel like it's up and over our heads. Getting rid of a lot of the white paper, although I'm going to pull some of that back as well. So now I'm looking at where do I need to bring back some of these light areas, and I'm going to use this paper towel. It's slightly damp so that I don't get crisp edges. If I want really crisp edges, I can use a very dry paper towel, but I want to keep these a little bit soft. I'm not in a big rush because things are still pretty wet right now, and if I begin pulling this off, they're just going to fill right back in. But one thing I am noticing, you can maybe see over here on the side, that I am getting a little bit of an accumulation of paint. And so I'm going to just pull some of that up with my damp paper towel. Most of that would get covered by matte anyway, but so I'm not really worried about it. But I do need some of these areas to be lighter or cooler where I want to have the clouds. So I'm looking kind of at this main one here. It starts a little left of center. There's the center of the page, and it's a little bit further left. So I'm going to pull that out. I don't have to come down into the lights so much. I know that these cool colors, these purples and things like that, they're going to cover this pretty well. But what's not going to cover very well is where the blues are. So I want to lift some of that. Trying to find cleaner areas as I do this. This is this can feel scary, this whole stage, but you do need to get back some of these lights, and I wanted some of the blues in between, so keep finding a cleaner spot. And I can start pressing a little harder. I can even get some clean paper towels. One thing I don't want to do is get my colors mixed up and start pressing that in, and that becomes a permanent part of my sky where I've got like purples or greens where I want to have purples and that sort of thing. So new piece of paper towel. This one's dry. Paper's starting to dry a little bit more. And I can actually try to make some shapes. So I'm kind of pressing a little bit more. This will give me a crisper edge on a few of these clouds. I'm not too concerned about making it precise just yet because I'm going to have another layer that I'll come in with. But I'm actually drying the paper with the paper towel here. So this is how I'm going to be able to keep some of the lighter areas of my clouds. I did leave a few areas a little bit lighter up there in the first place, so I'm not too worried about what's going on up here. I know that this area up here is going to be pretty dark, and I will be wanting to add in a few warms up in these areas. So in order for me to add those warms, I need to remove the cool. That's where the mud will come from. If I'm trying to add warm on top of cool, I will end up with mud. Always looking for a clean edge for blotting. Wiping off my tape so that that doesn't roll back and find any, give me any problems here. So I'm just wiping off my tape. The whole goal here is to keep things fresh looking. So I want to do as minimal sort of messing around or brushing things around with my brush and all of that as possible. And you'll notice that when I put that blue on, I didn't overlap my yellow. They just naturally mix together. Trying to lift out a few wispy clouds. You will go through a number of paper towels in order to lift out what you need. If you're working this size, a full sheet would be even more sort of scary to do, but you can get some pretty cool effects. All right, so we've got a little bit of a mottled blue sky. You can almost see where the clouds are going to be. So this is kind of a good start to getting the the clouds in there. I did another demo where I actually painted the clouds first, but those were clouds that were the type that are just sort of like really you could kind of point and say there's a cloud and there's a cloud. They weren't all kind of blended together the way these are. So, and I was working pretty small on that one. So this one I'm taking a little bit of a different approach for. So if you want to see that other video, I'll see if I can link that one in below. And it's actually one of probably my most popular video of all the videos I've done. And so it tells me that a lot of you kind of want to learn how to do skies. All right, at this point, I think I'm just going to take my dryer and get this dry. And at that point, I will start coming in to start building my clouds. Now, I want to dry this because I like what I've got and I want to kind of set it. And so by drying it, this is what's going to help it to sort of stay put without getting further lifting from subsequent layers and that sort of thing. So if I dry it well, the paint will stay put. Now, a few of these have harder edges. That's actually a good thing, I think. I do want to have a few harder edges. So I'm going to use a little bit of the colors that I already have on my palette, and then I'm going to be introducing a nice color for my clouds. I'm going to be bringing in some red to help create kind of a purple gray. But I'll use all the basically primary colors for this. I'm not going to take a gray right out of a tube or anything like that. And even though I used cerulean, which isn't the most transparent color, I used a bit of that. I did use it transparently, where I have thinned it down enough that it is, not straight out of the tube. I didn't want to imply that, you're using paint straight out of the tube or anything like that, but you want to make sure your colors are maybe 2 shades darker than what you want to end up with, because it will dry lighter than you expect. You can probably already tell. Now this is a sky without a reflection. I really just wanted the focus on the sky. I didn't really want to have a reflection for this one. That would be a whole other ball game. Then you have to decide what's more important, your sky or your reflection. If you don't want your horizon smack in the middle of your page, then, you got to make a decision about what's more important. I actually captured a couple of this was before I went away last week, and I, as I said, it was at the plaza near my home, and it was just a happenstance kind of thing where just the sky was just getting really nice just as I happened to be going to the store. So, and then I also got, as you saw last week, I had some lovely sunsets at the cottage where I was. Okay, so I don't need it bone dry, but I do need to try to set, especially where I'm going to be adding my clouds. That's really where I want to have, I don't want the underlayers to be disturbed. So I'm just drying this. I can still see a little wrinkling in the paper. I can tell it's not completely flat. You'll know it's completely flat if it's totally dry. And when you're working on something like this on your own, you can certainly take lots of time to do that. Patricia says she's sorry for being late. Well, I hope you brought a note. It doesn't matter. There's always the replay. You know, I always leave the replays up for you to review later, so you don't have to. If you want to paint along, I love it. Love to see some of your work, but you don't have to paint along. You paint along with the replay once you've seen the process. All right. So I think I'm going to let that get back to room temperature here. That's a heat tool that I was using, Ranger Heated Craft Tool. A lot of people ask me what that is. I'm just going to get this corner a little drier. It's a Ranger Heated Craft Tool. I actually prefer to let the paper dry naturally, like organically, because there's more sort of mellowing of the color blending that happens, rather than taking a dryer to it and stopping it in its tracks kind of thing. Okay. So now I'm going to let that cool while I mix some color. Same big brush. I'm going to go into my permanent rose. Bring enough over into my blue to start making it into a purple. And yes, I have the two blues in there, but it could be just one. I could use just cobalt. So that makes a bright purple. I'm not sure I want my clouds quite that bright, but I do need a lot of color, so I'm going to mix up a lot more. Bring this over to the main screen. I know it's a little more dangerous over my work, but I want a big sort of bluish purple. And to that I'm going to add some gamboge, right? Nice bright yellow. And the reason I'm adding yellow is to dull it. Doesn't that sound ironic? A nice bright yellow to dull down a color. But the reason that works is because it is a complementary color. I'm just going to grab another brush because I don't want to mess up my yellow too much here. So taking some of this, putting it off to the side, and just like adding spice to your favorite dish, I'm going to add in a little at a time until it feels correct. This is a tricky stage because you're mixing all three primaries. Very, very easy to make mud. I want a gray. I do actually want that. But if I add too much yellow, it really will be horrid. So I'll add a little at a time. And it's looking pretty dark, right? But on my paper, once my paper's wet, it won't look so dark. All right, so I want you to see the consistency of the paint as well. See how I can actually pull it and it almost maintains that same shape, but it's still fluid, but it is a thicker fluid than if I were to add a lot of water to it. So it's a liquid, it's a dense consistency, but not right out of the tube. Okay, I may need more paint than that, but I'm going to focus on one at a time. Now this is my reference photo. I'm going to take a look here at my gray. Okay, and knowing that it's darker, at least I can tell that it is similar. So if I take and sort of wipe that off, I think it needs a little bit more red in it. This looks a little bit too blue. Set my other brush down, I just don't know where. So I'm setting a little bit of that red down on the other side of this puddle so that I can make the adjustments without contaminating the whole puddle. So I can make my shifts. I do know that I'm going to need a little bit more of the quinacridone gold, and probably a little bit of the gamboge as well. Yeah, Angela's mentioning anybody try painting it in that crazy heat wave. I was at a cottage and I was painting, and indeed, I did find it very difficult. I was indoors, but with about 10 fans going indoors during that heat wave, and it was, yeah, it was intense. But I really did struggle for a while trying to actually paint during that heat wave, and it was pretty tricky. I really had to adjust my my painting style. Okay, that's much better. I've just tried a little sample there. It's probably too small for you to see, but I've just tried a little sample, and I'm feeling like that's a lot closer. Now I can make adjustments as I'm applying this and everything else. And I did say that I did like this version of the clouds a little better than the reddish clouds or the warmer clouds that I see in this printout. So I'm not too concerned about the color being precise. It looks good here and it looks good there as well. It's just, you make your choice. So don't get too hung up on, is it the right shade and all of this kind of thing. The only thing I want you to be careful of is don't make mud. All right, so with my clouds, once again, I want to make sure that I have a few soft edges. So how am I going to do that now that I've got this dry? Well, I guess the answer is I'm going to wet it again. So I'll move this out of the way. I'm really doing a bit of a dance here in my studio, trying to make room here. If I had a higher ceiling, I would put the camera a little higher, but not possible. So once again, this is clean water. And I am going to, not as wet as I did before. I want to have some wet areas, and I want to be really careful with the brushing, because if I brush too much, I will disturb what I've got. So I'm going to wet it again. One way to make sure that, to ensure that it goes on fairly evenly is a spray bottle. The spray bottle can be very useful here. So I can actually spray it on. Not too close, because that makes a big, but I will have to brush it so that I don't get little droplets. Yeah, just very gently. Now with clouds, you're always going to get a combination of hard edges, soft edges. So it's not really crucial that it be all perfectly even like it was originally. I'm probably going to need my spray bottle to help maintain some moisture on my paper as I go. But this is where my brush, I don't want my brush dripping or anything like that. So I need my reference so I have an idea. And actually, before I put my darks in, I'm going to put my lights in. I'm going to put my warm colors in. That was a little psych there. Sorry, if you were painting along, then you probably got ahead of me. I hope you didn't. I didn't throw you off. But anyway, I am going to take some of my warm colors here, and at the bottom of some of these clouds, There's some really nice warm colors. So I'm going to get some of that in there. And I am using a smaller brush for this. Now I'm not aiming to get these dark. I still want, because this is, I mean, clouds are gases, right? And they, you know, they don't have a lot of substance other than the gas. So I don't want to have a lot of dense color covering up my paper here. But I do want to move fast because of the fact that my paper is drying really quick. So I need to move along pretty quick. I don't have my brush overloaded. Overloading my brush will indeed cause blossoms. But this is where, in the whiter areas that I lifted out, I'm able to get a little warmth into some of those areas, you know, to warm up the part of the cloud where the sun is actually hitting the underside. I can still do a little lifting if I need to. So but I got to keep moving. Whoa, I nearly dropped my brush. All right, so here we go with some nice strong color here. Remember how much lighter this is going to dry. And notice the little trickles of cloud, the wispiness of the cloud that I'm putting in there. That's so that, you know, you get all types of the clouds in there. Leave a few little gaps in there. They're really quite important in the clouds. I've got a spot here. It looks a little dry. I'm holding my sprayer at a good distance when I'm doing this sort of thing because I want to be able to soften, but I don't want to hit it with a big blast of wet color. All right, keep going, keep going, keep going. Whatever happens, keep going. Getting quiet as I concentrate. But I'm going to just spray that a little bit. If you spray too much and things are starting to dry, you will end up with a speckled cloud. So if you don't want that, don't spray too much. This is just a mist. I'm letting most of it fall onto, like I'm spraying it over the paper and letting it sort of settle on its own. Now I lifted out a little bit right here. I want some of that lighter color underneath the cloud. I can even rinse my my small brush that I had the warm color in it and just hint at a little bit. It's not going to be as intense as it is down here where the sun is, but there'll be a little remnant warm color up there. So I'm just going to tuck a little bit of that in and keep going, keep going. Now I'm just going to spray this a little bit because I want this upper cloud to be fairly soft. So I'm spraying that area. That's why I moved my electronics. Okay, so that should flow pretty well since I've sort of softened up the cloud. But I really want to emphasize this reaching up to the corners and reaching up to the top here. My brush strokes are much more confident and like making sure I'm using the side of the brush and really getting some strength into some of these strokes because they are much closer. They're much bolder because they are close. If I need to change up the color of my cloud a little bit, I would just take one of my 3 colors. I'm going to put a little more cobalt in here and start just shifting the color of the cloud a little bit so it's not all identical. Some of these are lighter clouds. And there's a few little wispy ones down below. Combination of light and or crisp edges and soft edges. But I have a feeling this is going to dry too light, so I'm going to come in right now before it dries, get that a little stronger. Not trying to do one solid, and I know it looks a little light there. That's actually the shine on the paper. The undersides of the clouds are typically extra dark. They're carrying the weight of the rain, I guess. Not going to come back down into these. That they're beginning to sort of settle in and get dry, so I'm not going to get myself into trouble there. This is my smaller brush. Take some of that extra blue off. Just hint at a little bit of that warmth under some of these clouds, just at the lowest edge of the cloud, and not very much color, because they're, these clouds are further from the sun, or further from where the sun is setting, I should say. Okay, very little of that yellow color underneath, but just enough. I can hit that, I can just touch that purple and get a little bit of that warmth in there. When I say touch the purple, I'm not actually painting it on top. I'm painting it in the lighter area, and it is, and I'm connecting it to the purple. So it's touching it, I'm not painting on top. You know that purple and yellow are complements, right? That's all right. If I needed to lift out a little bit of color here, I certainly could. But I think I need to put more color down first. You might be noticing that sort of smiling, sweeping motion I'm using. That's the underside of the cloud. It's almost like a quilt on the underside of a cloud, and you get these puffy bits that are quite nice. Now I want to get a little bit more of that golden color up in here, but I'm rushing a little bit because I know my paper's drying. So if I don't hurry up, I will run out of time. Gets your adrenaline going, right? All right. So if there's something you want to lift out, you could, but I do caution you about fussing, playing. You know, I don't need to tell you, playing will get you into trouble, right? So, but I'm getting quite a nice feeling through here. This is kind of like the star of the show, right in through this area here, and the rest is ambiance and context, really. But this I feel is maybe a little bit crisp. Just going to take a damp brush and not even very damp, almost a dry brush. And that's it. That's all I'm going to do there. I'm not going to fuss with that anymore. The more I leave it, the more fresh the painting will be. So that gives me a really nice sky, and I would be able to put pretty much any sort of landscape in the foreground. Now, let's talk about that, because when you do have the setting sun, let's say trees, for example, we're going to put in some trees. Closest to the sun, just like the sky, these are going to be a lot warmer. As we get further away from the sun, like, as we start getting over here to this side or over to this side, those trees are going to transition from this sort of warm brownish color to a much more cool green, a dark, deep green kind of color. So it will transition, but slowly as it goes along. I did talk about doing trees last week, so maybe when this is a little bit drier, I will be able to add in a few trees and make this feel like I painted it up north. I did talk about stopping the drying process, and let me see if I can zoom in. I want you to see what's going on with like this area in particular. I can see the paint is running Part of this is because I sprayed it as well, but this is that sort of organic blending that's happening. I put that gold underneath and it is glowing through that purple. Now, normally, yellow and purple would end up making a muddy color, but when they blend organically on your paper, it's quite beautiful. I really love this natural blending here. If this were getting out of control, I would just learn from it. On your next painting, don't work so wet if you don't want it to blend together so much. If you're getting too many hard edges, you know you need to make your paper a little wetter. Or perhaps your mixture over here on your palette is a little too wet. So you have a wet surface, you have wet color you add in, you're not going to have control. So the little studies that you may have seen me do in my on my Instagram account, those ones are, you're working small. It's really good to experiment with working large sometimes, because it's a whole new skill set. You'll be learning from it. And yes, I know paper's expensive and all of that, but you do need to learn the skill of working larger as well, especially wet in wet. It can be a scary thing, but also very exhilarating. And if it works out for you, it is so rewarding. I always maintain that if you don't paint scared, you may never discover how good you can be. Right? If I stopped when I got scared, I would not be able to paint a whole big sheet like this. I'd still be scared and working in my little tiny size, my comfort zone. So get out of your comfort zone, paint wet. Hopefully you got a couple of tips from this. The spray bottle can be very helpful, but don't go overboard. Make sure your paint is darker and less runny than you typically use on dry paper. And evenly distribute the water in the first place so that you have something that you can control when you're putting the paint on. It's predictable. So hopefully those little tips will give you some help. Yeah, the colors in the warm part, I used quinacridone gold down here. I used a little gamboge, and then I finally used a little bit of aureolin as well. So the thing is, I would probably lean towards transparent colors if possible. If I tip this up and we get rid of some of the shine, you'll see maybe the result a little bit better. I'm going to... It's doing enough organic blending here, so I'm going to stop this. I love this little rainbow thing that's happening. And by the way, if you are mixing your own colors the way I have here, you will get that sort of separation of colors. You can probably see some of the red separating out from the blue a little bit. And it's gorgeous, absolutely amazing when that happens. I think that's one of maybe my favorite things in working wet on wet and mixing your own colors is having the colors resist each other a little bit and wanting to separate. And it just gives such a gorgeous effect. Get this dry enough so that you can see it without shine. But having a preference, I would just let this dry normally. But you will be surprised, I think, at how dry your brush needs to be when you are adding the color on a wet surface. Make sure it's wet before you start adding the color too. Sometimes I often have this in my workshops and classes. Well, I wet the paper first, and in fact they did. But what happens is too much of it got absorbed into the paper, and the surface became dry. So when they painted on, they got hard lines. So if you put something on and the line is too hard, that's an instant indicator that the paper has dried out too much. Get that spray bottle right away. Like, you can deal with these things right away if you're quick about it. Even this one down here that was quite dry, like it was really starting to dry down there, and I hit it with that barely damp brush. I managed to get some softness out of it. After it is dry, do not try to soften your edges. You will soften the layers underneath as well, because you'll end up having to scrub a little bit, and that's not a good thing. But the color mixing that's happening very naturally up here is fabulous. That's one of my favorite things. Okay. So that's my sky, and I'm not going to, I haven't quite decided what I want to put in the foreground here. I'm going to probably take some of the trees from the cottage or something. I'll use some references there. Just remember, near the sun, those trees are going to take on a warm tone. So you're going to have a warm dark and then a cool dark as you get away from the sun. So I will just switch on back here and make sure I haven't missed any of the questions. Whoops, I got that right in my face. I had to move it up. Let me see. Suzette says, I didn't realize you could paint clouds so deliberately, slowly. I thought I had to rush through, let it work and leave it be. Yeah, actually, that is pretty much me. That's what I thought. I thought you couldn't touch it again. And if you are working on non-cotton paper, that may be the case. I found that when I was working on student grade paper that was made of pulp, treated to be acid free, well, it sounded great, but the absorption is different. So the first layers don't actually settle into the fibers of the paper, and therefore trying to put another wash on top just moves around the first layer. So it's you're working on the right kind of paper. Huge. It will make an enormous difference. Let me see if there's any other questions or concerns or complaints here. So Angela says, really, Vicky, I decided that if I would literally have my sweat in it, causing unwanted blossoms. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's in reference to painting in the heat wave. But yeah, your climate, it will make a difference. Whether you're in a dry climate or if you're in a humid area. Here in Southern Ontario, it can get extremely humid in the summer months. Jane is asking, how long is it necessary to leave paper to dry for stretching? Can you blow it dry to speed up the process? First of all, yes, you can blow dry it. And I usually do mine the night before, but an hour or two, as long as the paper feels flat, completely flat, and not cool to the touch. I usually place the back of my hand on the paper and feel whether or not there's dampness. You know what a cinder block wall feels like? When you feel the dampness out coming through the brick. It feels kind of like that, where you feel the dampness in the paper. So it should feel pretty dry. But you'll know if it's perfectly flat again, because it will wrinkle as you're stapling it down, which is a little alarming, but it will flatten out. The idea behind the stretching is that, you get the paper as the fibers expanded as far as they will go, and then once it dries and all that water evaporates, they shrink again. So then the paper's as taut as it's going to be. You're never, in the painting process, you're never going to get it that wet again because you're only wetting one side. Okay. For a breeze today, it's actually, yeah, I was out this morning and it actually is very nice here. And I think I've reached the end now. I always, almost guaranteed, I always miss one question. I answered the question about the colors. I'll actually put those colors in the description. I'll add to the description and you can put that in there. But I do think you need to paint scared. I think that that's an important part of the learning process. You will stay stuck in your watercolor if you don't paint scared every once in a while. It's, I guess, scared or not worried about ruining a piece of paper, you know. Give an artist friend a piece of paper. They won't be as scared to mess it up, right? I don't know. So with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. And to my American friends, happy Independence Day or happy 4th of July. When is that? This Friday. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye.